Joining us now is the governor of Texas, and great to have you here with us, sir. Can you explain, what did you decide was the breaking point for you to take the steps that you did? And maybe also just back up and let people know, what are you saying about the compact between the federal government and the state of Texas today?
So it was the states that created the United States. And when the states voted to create the United States and have a constitution, included in that agreement was the compact that the federal government would take care of the states. And Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution speaks to that and says that if the federal government does not take care of the states, then the states are in danger, well, we can ask the federal government to live up to its obligation. Then the authors of the Constitution knew there would be times when the federal government would not live up to its duty. And so they empowered states in Article 1, Section 10, the right of self-defense. And what Texas is asserting is our Article 1, Section 10 right of self-defense, because the President of the United States is not fulfilling his duty to enforce the laws passed by Congress that deny illegal entry into the United States.
Governor, will you instruct your officers to physically prevent federal officers from accessing that part of the border?
So what Texas is doing is just very simple. And that is because the Biden administration has really, truly abdicated its responsibility to secure the border and enforce the laws. Texas very simply is securing the border. And so we put up the razor wire that you were talking about, Bill, and we put up all these barricades that actually have denied illegal entry. And as you pointed out also in that screen, that there are criminals coming across our border. Texas has a right as a state to stop criminals from coming into our state, to make arrests of those criminals. And we have National Guard as well as Texas Department of Public Safety officers who are there to make those arrests and to deny illegal entry. And Joe Biden actually does have an option here. Joe Biden's option is to enforce the laws of the United States and stop this illegal entry.
Doesn't look like they're going to do that. Listen to Karine Jean-Pierre. This is what she said about you yesterday.
It's unfortunate that there is a governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, who has politicized this issue of what's happening on the border. And it's not making people's lives safer. It's actually making it harder for law enforcement at the border to do their job.
She just said that this morning. How do you respond?
Well, obviously, it's a very uninformed comment on her part. There's really only one person in America not doing their job, and that's the President of the United States, who's not enforcing immigration laws. Also, as she has already been called out, and the president and other Democrats and media, they have cast a false narrative about some people dying on the border that apparently Texas denied Border Patrol access to. That's been completely debunked. The only thing that the spokesperson for Biden can do is to cast aspersions and lies, hoping that people will believe them. Because the truth of the matter is, what Texas is doing is what Americans expect to be done. Americans expect the border to be secured. Because Joe Biden has abandoned that responsibility, Texas is stepping up and doing it with all that razor wire that you're showing right now.
And you've committed to putting up more razor wire, where the U.S. Supreme Court just a few days ago said that the feds are allowed to cut through the wire that you've been watching yourself for a couple of years now. And just to go back to your first answer that you mentioned there, this was your statement yesterday. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. So if you lost this week at the U.S. Supreme Court, does this now go back there? And how would you expect to win a second time around?
Sure. One quick point of clarification. Something, Bill, you just said that everybody's saying, and that is that the Supreme Court, you said the Supreme Court said what Texas cannot do. If you look at what the Supreme Court actually issued, they didn't write any type of opinion. All they did was to vacate a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals order and to send it back to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's two sentences. There was no opinion about anything about razor wire or what Texas is doing or anything like that. But that point aside, regardless of what federal statute may exist, the supremacy clause means that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution itself provides Texas with a right of self-defense in this case because the United States has abandoned its responsibility to defend Texas.
So if you can get this case on the merits to the Supreme Court, you could win.
So, Dana, first, now I think maybe we will get it to the Fifth Circuit on its merits,
right,
where I believe we can win. And I do believe that when it gets to the Supreme Court, we can win. I don't know how and why the justices voted the way they did, but there seemed to be 4 justices who indicated at least an appetite to hear the case as is. A fair point is the case that was presented to the United States Supreme Court actually did not have very much of a record upon which an appellate court can actually make a decision. So those who may not have voted in favor of Texas, or let's say those who voted to send it back to the Fifth Circuit, they may have thought in their mind that there's not enough record for them to make a decision. But we don't know that, Dana, and this is very important, again, because there were no sentences or paragraphs or pages of an opinion written by the Supreme Court, so no one knows at all what they were thinking. All we know is they wanted to send it back to the Fifth Circuit.
Governor, I know you were just overseas in India, but I know you paid attention to New Hampshire the other night and what the exit polling told us and the entrance polling and our voter analysis said. Immigration is topic #1. We saw it in Iowa. We saw it in New Hampshire. So Americans are thinking about this, okay? And I'm curious about sort of the shadow story here that a lot of people don't talk about, and that is what the administration's doing with Mexico. And this has been going on for some time, maybe a month, maybe more than that, between Anthony Blinken and the president's deputies coming to Washington, D.C. Do you believe this administration is ready and prepared to change policy at the border in an election year with 10 months to spare that would make the issue less potent for Democrats come November?
It's hard for me to tell what's going on. What is clear is that Joe Biden has, from the time he took office, actually during the time that he was campaigning, he had no intent to secure the border. He talked about open border policies during the campaign, and now he's allowed open border policies with, candidly, most Americans not even knowing what that meant. But now the people in New York knows what it means. Now the people in Chicago knows what it means. People across the country are having to experience what open borders mean. Bill, I'll tell you this. Most incumbents don't lose elections. They get fired, and they get fired because they're doing a bad job. As you talked about, the immigration system and the border issue is the primary issue in America right now. This is an issue upon which Joe Biden gets a grade of F and deserves to be fired.
Governor Greg Abbott, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you all. Take care.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.